Hi, Asha. Thank you
Hi.
for meeting with me. I'm so excited. This is so
Oh,
great.
such a blessing to be here and see you again.
Yeah, I know we met very briefly, probably a few years ago at uh, one of my colleagues, Jackie Wilkins's herbal mentorship walk, and yeah, and you met my dog Coco, and you wrote a book.
Yes, I did.
Dive right in. You Are the Medicine, which I just finished reading. It just came out in March, right? I think that's when it was released,
Mhm.
published by Hay House. And it's a very beautiful book. Congratulations. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. It was definitely a labor of love.
How did it come to be? Like, was it something that you had in the works for a while, or was it something that just like the idea just was spawned? Like, can you maybe talk about that journey?
Of course. Yeah, actually, it was part of a contest. So there was a woman who said to me, there's Hay House is doing this diverse wisdom initiative. They want more diverse voices and they want more equity and representation across their authors. So would you apply? Would you do this essay? So I wrote an essay. And at the time, I just had this letter go viral called Dear White Woman, which is in the book. And so I was like, I'm going to include that in the essay and just say, I want to write this book. And I'd been writing in my Facebook community for years. And people are always like, this could be a book, all your compilations of all of your messages. But I never really thought, oh gosh, I had it in me to write a book. But I applied anyways. And then I got a spot to the writer's workshop in Houston and I flew down there. And then there was, I guess, 180 people that submitted an essay, and then 15 people got to go down there. And then out of that 15 people, there was going to be a winner who got a book deal. So we had to write a proposal. So I did that, and I worked really hard on my proposal. And then at the end of it, two of us actually won a book deal. And so it really was like a competition. And I just kind of tried for it, thinking, oh, this would be nice to have a book, to have everything in one place, to be able to say, like, if you, because I get a lot of DMs and questions. So, oh, you can now buy my book and you can find out the answer to that. So now it's here. I mean, that sounds so simple, but because there were so many steps in between, but that's how it came to be, really. And if I look back, I've loved Hay House since I was in my early 20s. I wanted to be on their stages. That was my big like sort of vision, to be drumming or to do some ceremony. That's where I saw myself. So this is a step towards that. I hope. Yeah, that's my vision.
It's so beautiful. Yeah, it's such a brilliant book. Like, I don't know if you had the concept in your head or if it like took a while to kind of figure out how it all fits together, but it takes you through the 13 moons of the year,
Mm-hmm.
and you start with a story, which is really beautiful, and then it connects to different medicines related to the moon, and these and there's a lot of like personal stories, which is really beautiful too, and then this connection to these like very universal lessons, like things like resting and self-compassion and self-love, and then it's also infused with, like, for me, are really important messages, things like ways that someone can appreciate indigenous culture without appropriating, like how to be respectful. um, and I think this is where like the Dear White Woman letter probably spawned from this sort of concept too, seeing people want to interact with or learn more perhaps about indigenous culture, but going about it in a way that was disrespectful in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that when I wrote that letter, I realized how big of a hot topic it was. Like, it really, I wrote it really for my own healing. I didn't think it would go viral. I wasn't expecting that. I just thought, okay, I'm going to write this because I know that it's been in my bones for like 10 years and I need to share it. And then when it went viral, I thought, and I mean, it touched a lot of points. So there wasn't nobody, not a lot of people were very happy. People were really angry. So the stuff that came back my way, I thought, there needs to be more education about this, and we need to know how to hold compassion for each other. Like, this was before the George Floyd incident, before I'm not that long before, but it was before. So it was before sort of cancel culture was really big. And I see that now. Like, I wish we had some training about how to hold nuance and how to hold compassion for ourselves and how not to just, to me, nothing's black and white. I think there's a lot of gray. I think there's a lot of nuance. And I don't want to be the voice to say you're doing this wrong and I'm shaming you. It's just like, this is a lived experience and how this feels. Now how can we do better? How can we learn together? This is like an invitation. So that's, I hope that's what the book does, is like an invitation for people to just go a bit deeper.
Yeah, it's beautiful because it always connects back to the reader. and then it brings up these themes of like investigate your own ancestry as well. Like, I had an interview with a colleague, Ray Saint Arnaud, and she was talking about how so she European ancestry like myself, and she's like, we also have generations, like we've been colonized. It's just many, many hundreds of years ago, and that pain runs deep. And so there's a way that we resonate with indigenous culture, but it's almost like I want to say almost like in a disembodied way, right? It's like bypassing the the ancestral trauma that we may have experienced, right? So it's like going back to your own roots and see what richness you can dig up from there as well, as we bring along these healings and as we learn to share them. That's what I got from that. Yeah, I remember reading the Dear White Woman and like people sharing it and being like, I know her. Like, yeah. um, but you speak in the book too about like brave spaces versus safe spaces. Maybe you could talk about that. That was really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think we talk a lot about creating safe space. This is a safe space. This is a safe space. And I used to do that all the time. I mean, my circles and in my mentorship groups and all of the things I was running. And then I took this diversity and inclusion course, and they said, this is a brave space. And they just spoke about the difference between those two things. And it really resonated with me because I thought, I mean, I think all along I was trying to create brave spaces. I just didn't have a name for it. But I don't want spaces where we're just sitting always in comfort. Because I think there's a difference between safety and then there's a difference between bypassing or tending to perhaps things that we need to be looking at, or not tending to things we need to be looking at. And then brave spaces just give us space, I think, for a container for us to look at truth, for us to maybe move that through our being, our hearts, our spirits, and then do something with it. Perhaps do something with it within an embodied way, like as you say, I think, and maybe taking action. So that really struck me of how can we create more brave spaces where we're talking about the hard things and we know we can go there, and we're not just going to bypass or stick with the like light and love and we're all one sort of concepts all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And taking like nectar from someone else's culture without really understanding the experience of what it is to have suffered the pain of that culture, right? Or of that, of you know that like the pain of that person's ancestry or ancestral trauma and things like that. And I think like one of the things, I have so many things I wrote down, but I want to want to get into like we talked, I mean, one of the things that came up, just staying on the topic of appreciating and not appropriating, was smoke medicine, which I really appreciated because it's hard to understand how one might use smoke medicine and not in a respectful way. And one of the suggestions that you gave many suggestions, and it was to refer to it as smoke medicine and not smudging, because smudging is more specific, and explore one's relationship with different herbs, especially and more specifically as alternatives to white sage. Yeah, and I like that a lot. Yeah, maybe you could speak a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. I just read an article a couple days ago, actually, because for the longest time there were people saying, "Well, white sage is endangered," and it wasn't. The issue was that Indigenous people might not be able to have access to it, and that's our traditional medicine. It's our medicine. So, what I did see the other day is that because it's being so over consumed, that people aren't respecting the growth of it, or they're pulling it up by the roots. Like they're not respecting it because it's just quick and fast, and the capitalism has taken over. So white sage is a hot topic, I think, in that way, and now even more. So it seems like it is being over harvested, and probably we don't want it to become endangered in that way, especially for its first peoples. So I wrote that book, I wrote that part probably a year and a half ago, and things change always, right? So I think that there are a lot of Indigenous people that say you can't use white sage for your practice. Um, I think that if you have a reciprocal relationship with any plant, we should have a reciprocal relationship with any plant medicine. But the issue is that those ceremonies were banned. It was illegal for us to practice these ceremonies, and people don't understand that when they're just taking it, and they feel this entitlement. Well, I get to use this, when they don't understand the history of these of indigenous people who we were banned from using this, and that's a lot, that causes a lot of trauma. Our medicine's stripped away and just eradicated, you know. So
Mm,
that disconnection is very strong. And then to have people just be like, well, I'm just going to take this and wave it around my stick around on Instagram and get more followers and get and buy
mm,
ads for it. It just takes away all the reverence and all the history that we've been through. So it's really about respect. And
mm,
I do believe, like, I think this is the hardest thing for people to, if you have a sense that you have a connection to smoke medicine and burning plant medicines, it has to be in your lineage somewhere. I just know there is, and folks have told me, because that's not my lineage, and folks will say, well, we had this singing practice, we had this other practice with these plant medicines. Like, find that out. I think it's so exciting to learn, because when I learn that, I think, I love that that's for you, you know, and I
mm,
can actually feel like, oh, right, like I can learn from that. And maybe I'll want to use it one day, but how can I use that with reverence and respect? Because it's not part of my lineage.
mm,
I think those parts are really important, but there are lots of alternatives that you can use. And in Ontario here, I mean, their cedar is really, really abundant. So we still offer gratitude to the earth when we take a piece of cedar and we use it for smoke medicine. All those things are important. And in the book, I try to outline sort of, you know, these are some suggestions. Of course, you need to go with what's right for you, but ultimately it's between you and your creator, because I'm not the smudge police in any way.
yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. Like you also mentioned like this idea of like wisdom being in our DNA and our ancestry. And there's, often we talk about like intergenerational trauma, but there's also intergenerational wisdom as well. And um, in the last 400 years, we've had 4,900, or no, 4,094
Yes.
ancestors uh, who are downloading their wisdom and their practices and the richness behind it, right? It's not so much the behavior without understanding the historical or spiritual context, but yeah, I resonate with what you said, where if you feel called to something, it must be in your lineage. Like maybe this
Mhm.
is your DNA resonating. And so go
Yeah.
and investigate that and understand the context in which you might have practiced that. Um,
Yeah. And I think that that's like, it's the hardest thing. It's so interesting because I'm noticing like the common questions that are coming up, like, how do we connect? And I think that my intention for this book was to infuse it with an energetic vibration that would activate that connection in some way. And I noticed that's part of my medicine is in circles. It's like that activation of, like, maybe it's tears come to your eyes, maybe your heart beats a little faster, maybe you feel warmth as your ancestors enter. That experiential, embodied, or even connection to spirit. We need those experiences to sort of keep going in that direction. And that has been colonized out of all of us through the patriarchy,
mhm,
capitalism. Like, this is not the way you learn. You don't learn through dreams, through visions, through feelings, right? But we do. So
mhm,
I want to make more space for that. And I know it takes a lot of unwinding because we've been so conditioned to learn only through books. And there's nothing wrong with learning through books. I wrote a book, but it's like,
mhm,
um, that is not the only way. How can we leave space for remembering to happen through just reading a sentence and just feeling like, I know that from somewhere, or meeting a person and feel like I've known you from some past place. Like, trusting those things, I think, is so vital to understanding our wholeness.
yeah. And there's something really beautiful in your book about it's almost like a different way of conceptualizing grief or loss, where you tell a story about when your grandparents passed, you felt this clearing, almost as if they were carrying off some of the ancestral trauma that was no longer yours to hold on to, and that their ability to maybe heal that or hold that in life um, wasn't as strong as their ability to do that as they pass through this life. And that was just, yeah, it was beautiful to me because when we think of, at least in this Western culture, loss, there's an emptiness, there's a missing, um and we don't see it as a someone's passing brings healing for the current living generations. And yeah, and it's the sense of like they're still with me, they're still holding me, but they're also, their presence now, their spirit is healing me.
Right. Yeah, and I felt that so deeply with both of my maternal grandfather and my paternal grandmother. that it was sort of like a scooping up of, it was mostly because I was doing this work around how much ancestral trauma do I need to carry through this one body? Like, and I
Mm,
say that in the book, like I had to come to terms with, oh my gosh, I cannot carry all this responsibility. It's not just all on me. And that might be, I have a Capricorn moon. So I tend to like have this responsibility thing on my shoulders, but I had to come to claim like that I want to have joy and ease in my body. I want to have health and wellness. And if I'm just like moving through life, just
mm,
moving through all this ancestral trauma through my own body, I'm not going to have those things. So
mm.
um, sort of having that essence of like those ancestors taking that, transmuting it. I mean, they're in the cosmos. Think about how vast the cosmos are and what magic can happen there. That
Mm.
is what I sense, at least.
Yeah, that's yeah. Just the sense of like yeah, this lifting off of something that felt heavy. Um, I don't know what else I wrote about it, but I remember I took some notes this morning because I was like, I want to capture some ideas that were really beautiful. This other piece of um, this really resonated for me as a practitioner, like as a clinician, as a healer in a sense. This idea, and you share an experience that you in visiting even alternative healers, there was this sense conveyed to you either implicitly or explicitly that there was this brokenness that you were coming in with, right? So this need to like, you need to detox you or get the wrong foods out of your system or XYZ to patch you back together.
Mm-hmm.
And this alternative that you found in homeopathy,
Mm-hmm.
but that you also talk about is as this little spirit of seeing the person as a whole. And yeah, maybe you could talk a bit
Yeah.
about that. Yeah, I know we're
And
jumping
this
all
is,
over.
no, this is great. And I love that. I love that you've actually gone through the book. Not many people are bringing forward this in interviews. So this is so beautiful for me to reflect on it as it touched you. Um, yes, I mean, that was, I was diagnosed with lupus when I was 17. And then when I was about 21, I started seeing alternative practitioners. And I think there was a desperation inside of me. Like, I will say that, like, to heal myself. And it felt like I needed to be healed, like, heal me, and there's something wrong with me. And I think that might be combined too with some ancestral trauma of like, just some of the racism and other things. And I think that that's really important to note. I think that's a missing part in our wellness world is we're not looking at those ancestral wounding or the trauma that folks are carrying in with us, especially people of color. And then it just ends up being like a blaming, shaming thing. So I'd go to the naturopath and they would be like, yes, all these things are, you need to detox, you do this diet, this diet. Like, I mean, I've done all the things and of course found the things that have really worked for me. Um, but there's still this, and I see it now. That was 20, I'm 45 this year. So I was 21. That was like 25 years ago almost. That still, I still feel that thread in the wellness world of,
Mm-hmm.
especially right now, it's cleansing season. So it's like, if you're feeling this, and this is wrong with you, like, I think if you're trying to do things for your body and your wellness, we don't need to be told that there's something wrong with us. I think that that could be so harmful, and it gets in so deeply. So it was actually one of my therapists who I just adore, and I've worked with them for almost 4 years now. We've unwound some of that, and just because I can still see myself getting hooked in. So yeah, that's been like in that little spirit. Like, I do think, as a homeopath, I saw the vital force. I feel the vital force. I sense how that vitalistic energy works and how that can get knocked out of us. But I also think it could get knocked out of us by feeling that shame, like constantly searching and being like, this isn't it. Is this my miracle cure? Is this the way that's going to help me? Like, I think that those things aren't necessarily as supportive as they could be. And I don't want to shame any practitioners listening because I think we've all probably, you know, said those things or
Mm-hmm.
cared in those ways because we just want to help. But I think there can be a different way. There can be a more compassionate way to just see the person in front of us and not to see what needs to be fixed. I think is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I'm getting a sense when you're even talking about like I need to find the answer, this removal from self, right? We're outside of ourself now trying to bring in the missing pieces, the missing information instead of coming to the situation as a whole being and really holistically, right? Like how do I achieve the balance that I'm looking for, but knowing that I'm whole and perfect, you know It's an interesting concept. It's like even hard for me to really embody as a healer. I'm gonna sit with it, because I think so much of the model in which we provide our services is this capitalistic model. It's like you take your body to a car mechanic, like you get it patched up, you get it fixed, and there may be a co-creation of expectation in that. But that it still is the responsibility as a practitioner, even if someone's coming in with like, something that they perceive needs to be fixed, to still engage them respectfully as a whole person and see their wholeness, because as you mentioned, as you write about in your book, that in and of itself is healing. It shifts the
It really
frame
is.
from the person who feels broken. Yeah.
It does. And just one person doing that for you, I think, could change the trajectory of that dis-ease being expressed in your body. I think it's
Mhm.
almost just like a validation or acknowledgement. Like, I see you as perfect here right now. And that alone, I think, can just change things. Like, changes your cells as we speak it, right? As if we were speaking those to ourselves. Imagine if we weren't telling ourselves we were broken or sick or needed fixing. I think that that would start to heal us. I mean, I imagine it would. So I'm holding that. I've been wanting to do this chronic illness course for, gosh, like 5 years. It's one of those things that's just been like, kind of, my seeds tend to plant really slowly and I tend to water them really slowly. But that's one of the aspects, and I think, which is missing in our wellness and alternative health world is, yes, we have the physical, we have the smoothies and the green juices and the fast, like all the things, right? And we have even nervous system work, I think, is really important. But then it's like these little things that are unwinding from colonialism and capitalism and just seeing ourselves as whole. So that is coming as we're speaking. I'm like, okay, this needs to be birthed
Yeah.
soon, because I think it's really important for us as practitioners and space holders, and as people who are taking responsibility for our health journey. I think because ultimately the folks you're attracting, they are doing that, right? They're asking for help, and sometimes that's a hard thing to do. So we must respect that, I think.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's like, I have a bunch of brain fog right now, but I was like, I had something kind of come up into my consciousness and then just like went away. This idea of like um, this little spirit, right? This little, this like the vital force. I sort of saw an equivalency there. Um, oh, I remember what I was going to say. I think, yeah, part of this sort of Western colonialist model is this reductionism thing, right? It's like, let's get down to the issue, to the thing that's wrong, to the screw that's loose kind of mindset. And the problem with that is that there's many problems, but one of them is that that's not really how it works. And so what you do is you send the person on a chase to try and fix things, right? So you're like, okay, if I tighten the screw, this will work, but why was it loose in the first place? And you may get into ancestral trauma, um, and oppression, these deeper things that that go unacknowledged if you're focused on like the pure reductionist model.
Yes, that's so brilliant. And I think that that's probably what was missing is, and I think I shared that in the book, like there
Mm.
weren't a lot of practitioners that were able to hold space for
Mm.
generational trauma. Like I mean, it wasn't such a buzzword back then either, but I think that that is so vital, especially if you're opening up your space to marginalized folks. Um, I think and we all should be, we all should be, right? So it's like, I think that we need a little bit more, yeah, just like a wider lens or on the lifetimes and lifetimes that could be sitting in your DNA.
Mm.
And sometimes that feels overwhelming too. So I understand sometimes it's easier just to be like, this is the first step, and
Right.
first steps are so great. But I think for folks of color, to make it braver spaces in that way would be to like really address that there's things other than just your diet that are going on here.
Right. Right. Yeah, even when we talk about not necessarily trauma work, but in having conversations around trauma, is focusing or giving a lot of weight to and really highlighting stories of responsiveness and resilience, in
Mm,
ways that people responded versus things that happen to you. I think in that, when we shift it like that, you see somebody as always responding and as always
mm,
um, coming at situations with skills and knowledge in a place of agency and empowerment, and making decisions based on circumstances that they may face or have faced, um, which I think again shows respect, for the person's the ways in which they're responding that may go unnoticed, you know. Yeah.
Oh, I love that so much. I love that. I mean, I love these conversations because I think we need to be having them with our colleagues and with each other, and just, and again, just in like a, oh, how can I maybe unwind that way of knowing and just look at a different way. I think these are so important to talk
And I know there was one, I know it was, you were talking about a healer, I think Mario Martinez, who works
about. Hmm.
with people from Tibet. He talked about how his theory is that diabetes arises when we bypass anger and go from pain to forgiveness. So then there's almost this metabolism of sugar. Um, there something, happens with that, and I've seen this with trauma work, that anger is often a very necessary, very healing step for a lot of people. And there's different models that will show, like polyvagal
Hmm.
theory, and um, yeah, and I think this is another piece too. It's like, can we honor anger, sit with anger?
I think that's so huge. And I guess I was really thinking about the Indigenous community because we have so much right to be angry.
Mm,
And yes, there is some anger that rises, but what I tend to see is a lot of that anger is turned inwards, and
mm,
that's where we see such high rates of suicide and alcoholism and violence in our communities, like when we don't have a space to express that anger, because even as we express it, people are like, oh, get over it, this is in the past. Like, it's like there's no space or even being heard or seen in that way. So I think that those expressions of anger are so vital to our wellness in so many ways, but it's just something that is not really that held or supported in our collective energy. At least I don't see it being that, but I think we're getting there, maybe, and being a little bit more curious about that.
yeah, anger, I think, is an emotion that is ill tolerated in our society as a whole. Like, we don't have healthy ways to express it. There aren't, I don't see rituals or things that we can do to use anger. Like, it's usually seen as a threat or a problem. It's hard to really move into anger in a way that, you know that offloads it, that allows it to be expressed, to flow through. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
often turns inward as shame. You talk about the inner oppressor,
Mm-hmm.
and there's many words for that. The inner critic, but the inner oppressor I really like. It's like we turn that inwards. Um,
And those voices can be loud. Like, I think if you actually ask yourself, because I think it just happens so naturally, and if we just stop ourselves at one point in the day and think, oh, is my inner oppressor like at the helm here? Whose voice is this, right? I think that's such a powerful question. Whose voice is this? Is this really the voice I want to be speaking to myself? Is this a parental voice, an ancestral voice, a collective voice, right? It's like we just need to be, I don't, not need to be, I think just as an invitation to be mindful of those voices that are just going on tape in our heads all day long. But for myself, that inner oppressor is very, very tied to residential school trauma. Like, I can actually see it. It's like this nurse or this missionary or this, sorry, like a nun or a missionary or a priest that's just like, you are not good as you are. We need to strip everything from you. And it's just very, very strong. So when I speak about how I know the generational trauma
mm,
impacts you, it's very experiential, and it's there. And it's been through so many of the healings I've done with practitioners myself that it just keeps rising. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a deep one.
yeah,
So if I have that, I'm sure it's pretty universal in that way.
yeah. It's a good point. I was thinking about this actually yesterday. I was in the bath, and I was thinking, we hear a lot about discipline, as a
Mm.
positive thing. Like, you need to have discipline, you need to discipline yourself, and you can't just rely on your motivation, these sorts of messages. And I was thinking, like, I wonder if our ancestors, and I always think back to, like, kind of hunter gatherer, like, that far back,
Mm.
but I wonder if they had discipline, like, if discipline was a concept as big as it is now, or we ultimately, I see it as like we have to bypass something, a natural intuition or desire, flow. In the book, you spend a lot of time with bear medicine and deer medicine, talking about rest and self-compassion, sweetness. And it's almost like not trusting the great mystery. I want to get into that. And there's need to sort of like, I need to override that. I need to discipline myself. It's a very like, you bring up the residential schools. It's a very like Catholic thing. I feel that too in my ancestry, where there's like a shame. There's a, you need to be better. Something about you is broken. And yeah, it's that we internalize that process. We internalize that oppressor to, yeah.
Yeah, yes, I think, if you bring up the hunter gatherer kind of energy, the sense I get is like, they just had to do it. Like they didn't have, like they had to, but then also they knew that there were cycles for rest. So it wasn't like they were like, I have to block this time out to rest now. It's like, oh my goodness, my body's so tired because I've been doing all of these things. And now my body's telling me it's time to rest. So I just think we've gotten so far away from just that really natural animalistic feeling of like, I'm so tired, let me lie down. That you're right, that capitalism just like pulls us forward and says like, oh, I can't rest, I can't do that. So the discipline probably was just naturally in them because they had to get things done, and then they knew that rest was such an important part of that cycle too. And you're right, we bypass that so much. I mean, I'm still so guilty of it. It's yeah, those those collective voices are so loud. So I think that rest is just such an important part of the whole cycle. And yeah, discipline I think probably has its place, but it's probably is sort of an imposed energy on us.
I'm thinking about that. Like, I'm writing a paper for this master's that I'm doing, and you have this like, there's a pain involved. And yeah, I think in our ancestry, I mean, hunger would be a driver. The body would sort of tell, and also possibly like ritual and community and a sense of responsibility, something kind of that feels more like it's holding you versus this internal like forcing. I need to put my body in a chair and I need to withstand what my body's telling me and just do the thing. Like it's, yeah, versus flow with the group, the community, your natural impulses, the seasons, these different inputs that are guiding you. Yeah, I yeah, this thing of like, you have to kind of like show up every day to your yoga mat or your exercise thing and build
wake
your
up at
muscle.
4:30. Yeah.
Exactly.
I'll never be part of the early riser club. Like I've tried and it's just like, I don't know, maybe when my kids are older, but I've always think, oh my goodness, like that just doesn't sound, I really love to sleep, so that doesn't sound fun at all.
Yes. And maybe you can talk about the great mystery. I mean, that was really beautiful, that passage in your book. I can even quote it. I have it written down.
Sure.
Yeah. Let me find where I wrote about it. When we truly let go and surrender to rest, the great mystery can meet us. Bear medicine carries this magic, reminding us of unseen forces that are at play when we take the time we need. Miraculous things happen daily. Sometimes we need to stop and listen to let them in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so, oh my goodness. The Great Mystery is one of my favorite allies, I feel like, and it's one I dance with all the time because I can forget that time, even as we're speaking, I had this huge launch. It launched March 15th, and I'm sitting in the void right now. So it's perfect time that we're talking about the Great Mystery because I can forget. I have this like impulse, like what's next, and everybody's asking me what's next, Asha, and I literally want to just like start to cry when they ask me that because I'm just like, I've done so much. So it being in the void of like the unknown, the meandering, there's no really next direction that's so clearly laid out. But if you can surrender here and just be like, I'm open to the spaciousness, because really sometimes spaciousness is what we pray for when we're so busy, right? So it's like, I'm open to this. The great mystery can touch me here because there's not a lot of other things taking up that space for me, my attention. And I know that to be true. And I shared that in the book because I was so busy and so overwhelmed and burnt out. And then I like stopped my practice and then I got pregnant and I wasn't I was not planning on having another child, and he's a delight. And he came in as like a little spark of sunshine, and I'm so grateful. But it's like I just know that that void creates space for new life. It creates space for a spark of creation because it happened in my womb space, and I think that's like such a brilliant teaching for me. I needed that teaching to be that big, to be that miraculous. But I do see it too when I do go through things like this cycle, which was like a ton of extroverted energy, a ton of energy the last 2 years trying to write this through a pandemic. Like it was a lot of investment. And then it comes out, everything's, and then it's just like, boom, and people say it's like postpartum. And I am actually writing a blog about that because right now, because it feels like grief filled and just like, that void isn't comfortable. So it's not comfortable, but looking back, you can be like, but that's where the magic happened. So it always happens. So I'm speaking to myself here as I'm reminding myself that this is the magical place.
Yeah, it's hard to sort of relax into those cycles. Even, sort of female hormonal cycle, right? It's not linear. There's ebbs and flows even in the course of a month. And I have a hard time too trusting that when I'm going through a period of real laziness and no motivation, and to trust that ideas and inspiration will come and then I'll be really lit up about something and really like full of fire and energy. But it's hard to trust that. And then when it happens, you're like, why did I ever worry about this not happening?
I know. It's like when the practice used to get so slow. Like I remember that so viscerally because it would be like, I'd be so busy, and especially in the early years, then there'd be like everybody would cancel that week, or there'd be like nobody on the books, and I'd be like, what's going on? And I would just freak out thinking, and I'd cry on the couch, it's failing, I'm never going to make it as a homeopath. My business is done, I'm going to go work at some chapters. That would happen every time. But it really was an invitation to just like take that space and let the great mystery touch you. So I'm getting a little bit better at it now. That was like 15 years ago. It's getting better.
The great mystery, like it definitely shows up in private practice in that sense that you're like, I'm happy that my schedule is relatively clear this week, but does it mean I'm a terrible practitioner? Like, why? Does everyone hate me? What's going on? And so let the mind come in, and then you have a bit of a lull in other things that are happening, and then you get full again. But I definitely, I'm like, are there people busy? What's happening? Is
I know we can do that to ourselves so often. It's such a dance, it's such a delicate dance. So I just think we need to have compassion for ourselves when we see it and just be like, right, this is another cycle. And as we do it a couple times, maybe just being mindful of it and acknowledging, oh, this is how I'm feeling, and then just knowing, okay, it's going to happen again and it'll be okay. So yeah, I think I love that though, because I will never forget those feelings for as long as I live, and how I just would freeze. Oh my goodness, what's going on?
Yeah, what's next? Pump out another book. Where's the sequel? Yeah,
I know. That's why when people ask me that question, I'm just like, well, I do. I mean, I do have an oracle deck coming out with Hay House next year too, so that is next, and that is super exciting because I've loved using decks for probably for 20 years in my circles with my clients. So now I'll have my very own to teach from, which will be really amazing.
That's really exciting. That sounds really awesome. Yeah, I'll sometimes have patients, and I've done this exercise myself, is just to sit down and write what I've done in the last. It could be the day, it could be the year, especially during the early months of the pandemic, when productivity felt very different. I remember I had to like sit and be like, okay, you updated your website, you did this thing on Instagram, you changed your profile picture, like all these things that don't seem like they amount to a lot, but when you accumulate it all, you're like, that's a lot of, no wonder you're tired. It's okay to rest.
Yes.
Have done lists.
I love that. It's an amazing practice.
Yeah, I want to see what other. Yeah, I think this also. Oh, I really like this. There's sort of these concepts that I clump together, but and this has been really helpful for me, is this turning envy into a mirror. And there's somebody I follow called Lacey Phillips, and she has this concept. She calls it expanders, like seeing somebody who has what you want, that you envy, rather than where I go immediately, which is to like, why don't I have that? What's wrong with me? Is to see, wow, this is possible. And I wouldn't be resonating so deeply with this if it wasn't also possible for me. And talk about that, where you saw someone who had sort of the the ideal clinic that you wanted, and the sense of maybe inadequacy about not having it. And then you looked around one day, you're like, I have this clinic too now. And
Yes.
she was just inspiring me.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I think it's so natural for us human beings to feel like envy or jealousy, especially nowadays, right? Because it's like we're just bombarded with everyone else's lives all the time.
Mhm.
So yeah, I love to. I mean, I think that it's so easy to bypass it or to shame ourselves or to be like, oh, what's wrong with me, or why don't I have that yet, or I'm such a bad person because I'm jealous of that person, or whatever that is. But just to like sit with it and first acknowledge it. I'm feeling envious. That's something I want to. How badly do I want it? What would it be like if I had that? How would it feel? And just like step into that, because I think it is a thread. It's like a little seed saying, like, this is for you too. This is for you. The universe is dropping it down in a version that's it's going to be different. It's going to look different though, probably, right? If you're the medicine behind it, and it's possible for you. So I truly believe that.
Mm. Yeah, and I've definitely had that experience where I remember like looking on someone's Instagram, and she's like, I spent 8 hours surfing, and then we had a fire after, and we just sat on the beach. And I remember being like angry, like, what, how'd she get that? Why? And then I remember, maybe not even a month later, like connecting with people that I just met, and we're on the beach and we've spent all days. Like I had that, and it flowed through me, even though I couldn't see how I might have gotten there. And so now it's difficult because you still get that like, I hate everyone that's on the beach right now. But
I feel that right now. I really want to go to the beach.
I know, yeah, but very called to the ocean. I'm like, how do I get there? Let's make it happen. But yeah, but it's like, okay, well, it's a reframe. It's like, well, this is coming into my consciousness. This is something that I'm really resonating with. How can I open myself up to seeing how that might be a possibility for me? I may not have the answer yet on how to get there, but how might I kind of, wow, okay, this is really important to me. How do I
Exactly.
receive that? How do I allow that image to make an imprint on me versus just annoy me and send me into comparison? And
All the
yeah,
things. All the things.
yeah.
Yes.
And then
Well, thank you.
yeah,
Thank you so much for having me. I have to
yes.
run soon. I have to run
Thank you
soon.
so much, Asha. So yeah, so your book is You Are the Medicine. I'll have links that people can purchase it on Amazon Indigo. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Oh, I love chatting with you. It's been such a gift. It's been such a
Thank
gift.
you so much. I'm so happy that we made this happen. Thank you.
Me too.